I remember the first time I stepped into his world. I was 25, fresh out of college, thinking I knew what love was. Then I met him, and everything changed. His smile was easy, charming, but it wasn't until I climbed into his black Cadillac Escalade, the leather warm from the sun, that I realized just how different his life was. The garage wasn't just a garage, it was a showroom. A Corvette Z06 gleamed under the lights, a cherry red Chevrolet Camaro parked beside it, and in the corner, my jaw dropped at the sight of a pristine Dodge Challenger Hellcat, engine roaring like a beast waiting to be unleashed. I thought, wow, this man is rich. But I had no idea how deep this went. By the time I slid into his Tesla Model S Plaid, the city skyline sparkling behind us, I felt like I was living a dream. Champagne in the fridge, silk sheets, penthouse views. I had married a millionaire. Yes, but as we drove past the neon-lit streets, past the valet lined with Mustangs and Corvettes, I couldn't shake this tiny, gnawing question. How does someone acquire all of this so young? And then the first clue dropped. A cryptic phone call in the middle of the night, his voice tense, whispering about a deal that can't be traced. My heart raced. I thought I knew him, but I didn't know a single thing about the shadows behind that luxury. That night, my perfect life started twisting into something I couldn't escape. If you enjoy real stories with dark secrets and hidden truths, subscribe to this channel. More shocking stories are coming. I still remember the exact moment I realized my life had changed forever. I was 25, bright-eyed, and completely unprepared for the world I had just stepped into. The day one married him, I thought I was walking into a fairy tale, but it was a fairy tale painted in black and white shadows I couldn't see yet. The first time I saw his house, I had to stop the car. It wasn't just big, it was a fortress of glass and steel, perched above the city like it owned the skyline. The driveway stretched longer than any street I had ever walked, lined with perfectly sculpted hedges and fountains that sparkled in the sun. A Cadillac Escalade sat waiting for me, polished until it reflected every shard of light, the leather seats warm like it knew I was coming. Beside it, a Chevrolet Corvette Z06 glinted menacingly, its low, sleek body hinting at speed I would never dare to reach. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and fresh espresso. The floors were marble, so polished I could see my own reflection as I walked. I traced my fingers over the walls, art I didn't understand, sculptures that looked alive, and everywhere, the signs of his wealth shouted louder than words. A Dodge Challenger Hellcat in the corner of the garage, its engine purring even while still. A Tesla Model S Plaid parked like it was waiting to show me a city I had never explored. I thought I had married a man who was simply successful. But the first night, I saw the first crack. A phone buzzed in the kitchen. He whispered into it in a voice that didn't sound like him, a voice I had never heard before. It has to be done tonight. No mistakes. I froze. That small phrase lingered in the air longer than the fragrance of the roses in the hallway. I wanted to ask, but something about his expression-tight jaw, eyes shadowed, made me swallow the words. Instead, I poured myself a glass of champagne from the crystal decanter on the counter and tried to steady my racing heart. The penthouse was a dream, all soft lights, silk sheets, and a view that stretched endlessly. But as I looked out over the city, seeing the valet line packed with Mustangs, Camaros, and more Corvettes, a tiny seed of doubt planted itself in my chest. It was just a whisper at first. How does someone acquire all this so young? Then came the first weekend. He took me out in the Corvette Z06, the roar of the engine echoing like a warning. We drove past neon-lit streets and exclusive clubs I had only seen in movies. Champagne flowed like water. People laughed around us, dressed in designer from head to toes. And me, I felt both exhilarated and terrified. The luxury was intoxicating, but every glance, every whisper I caught from his side of the conversation hinted at something I wasn't supposed to know. Dinner at his favorite restaurant was another shock. A table reserved on the rooftop, the skyline glittering behind us, and servers who treated him like royalty. Rolls of $100 bills passed casually across the table, not for me, of course, but for him. I laughed nervously when he handed a tip that could feed a small family for a month. He smiled, but there was a glint in his eye, like he knew the power he held, and I was just learning the rules of the game. That night, in the quiet of his bedroom, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every flash of the garage, every whispered phone call, every suspiciously tight smile. I kept asking myself, do I really know him? Or am I just in love with the dream he's selling? I didn't have the answers yet, but something told me my life had shifted into a world where the beautiful things, sleek cars, champagne, silk sheets, were just the surface. Beneath it all, there was a darkness, something that gleamed just as brightly as the Corvette and the Challenger, but would sting like a hidden blade if I wasn't careful. By the end of that week, I realized one terrifying truth. I had married a millionaire, yes, but I had no idea how he made his money. And the very first clues I was seeing weren't just hints, they were warnings. And I was about to find out that the luxury, the glamour, and even the roar of those American muscle cars were only the beginning of a story that would consume my entire life. By the time the second week of our marriage rolled around, I started noticing the patterns I had missed the first week. At first, they were small, a shadow in his eyes, the way he'd step away to take certain calls in hushed tones. But as I watched him move through his days, the truth began to press against the edges of my mind like a storm I couldn't ignore. It started with the garage. I had already seen the Cadillac Escalade, the Corvette Z06, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, and the Tesla Plaid. But that Saturday morning, he took me to another part of his property, a private hangar tucked behind a high gate, hidden from even the street cameras. The doors lifted, revealing not one, but three more cars I hadn't seen before: a Ford GT, a sleek black Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, and an American classic 1969 Mustang Boss 429. All pristine, polished to a mirror finish. I ran my fingers over the leather, traced the curves of the paint. The adrenaline rush of touching such machines was almost intoxicating, but I couldn't shake the growing unease. These weren't just possessions, they were trophies. Trophies from something I didn't understand. He smiled at me as he leaned against the Ford GT, arms crossed, casual and relaxed. I like to keep my hobbies private, he said. But the glint in his eyes wasn't casual, it was deliberate. There was a pride in secrecy, a thrill in the things he didn't want me to know. Then came the first major warning, a phone call in the middle of dinner. I remember the way he stiffened, his fingers tightening around the wine glass, the sound of the ice clinking against crystal echoing through the penthouse. He stepped out onto the balcony, out of earshot. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone low, urgent, almost scared made the hairs on my arm stand up. Curiosity gnawed at me. By the time he returned, he was smiling, joking, pouring me another glass of champagne, but I could feel the tension hanging over us like a shadow. I tried to push it aside, tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but something inside me whispered, this is just the beginning. Luxury became a strange kind of cage. Every time I walked through the penthouse, I saw the Corvette in the driveway, the Hellcat in the corner, the city lights reflected in the glass walls. I loved it. Yes, I loved the thrill of driving the Tesla Plaid through empty streets, the speed, the roar, the way strangers would stare, but it was always tempered by that shadow I couldn't name. Then, the first financial oddity appeared. He left a folder on the dining table, neatly organized, labeled accounts. I picked it up, curious, and my stomach dropped. Offshore accounts, shell companies, transfers. I couldn't begin to understand. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, moving like water through channels I had never even heard of. And next to it, a note in his handwriting: trust is earned, not given. Keep your questions to yourself. I tried to laugh it off, tried to pretend it was just complicated business. But late that night, as I sipped my champagne alone in the living room, I opened my phone and searched for his name online. The articles were sparse, carefully sanitized. No real explanation for the empire he claimed to have built. And the ones that did exist, they felt off. Glorified press releases, quotes that seemed planted, stories that avoided any real detail. The tension started to build like a slow crescendo. A driver called at odd hours to pick him up, always in a black Cadillac Escalade, always with tinted windows. A private chef arrived in a white van marked only with initials. Luxury, yes, but organized, secretive, meticulous. There was a rhythm here, a system. and I was only just beginning to notice it. By the end of the second week, the first confrontation happened. I tried to ask him about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the private calls. His smile didn't falter, but there was steel in his voice. "Some things aren't meant to be questioned," he said. I wanted to push further, but his presence, calm, confident, untouchable, made me hesitate. He had power, yes, but he had control. And in that moment, I realized the first terrifying truth. I wasn't just married to a millionaire, I was married to a man whose life was deliberately hidden, layered, and protected by walls I couldn't yet see. That night, I lay in the silk sheets of our penthouse, the skyline glittering behind me. The Corvette, the Hellcat, the Tesla, all of them gleamed under the streetlights, symbols of a life I was only beginning to understand. My heart raced with excitement and fear. Something about this life was intoxicating, addictive. But I also knew, deep down, that it carried a price I hadn't yet discovered. And as I drifted to sleep, I realized I was no longer just a bride in a fairy tale. I was a witness, a participant in a story I hadn't asked for. A story that was about to reveal secrets I could never unseen, luxuries that were only the surface of a deeper, darker world. By the third week of our marriage, I could no longer ignore the whispering doubts gnawing at me. The luxury that had seemed like a dream, the Cadillac Escalade, Corvette Z06, Dodge Challenger Hellcat, the Ford GT, and even the classic 1969 Mustang Boss 429 was no longer just a thrill. It had become a warning, a code I wasn't yet fluent in. It started with a casual comment. We were driving downtown in the Tesla Plaid, sunlight reflecting off its mirror-smooth paint, when he mentioned a shipment he needed to approve. I didn't think much of it at first, until he said, almost offhandedly, "It has to move, tonight, untraceable, no mistakes." The words lodged in my chest. I pretended to focus on the road, but my mind was spinning. Untraceable, shipment. What is he involved in? I felt like a character in someone else's story, a lot. Spectator, kept at a distance from the truth. That evening, curiosity won. While he was away for a late meeting, I wandered into his office. The room smelled faintly of leather and aged wood, and the city lights spilled across the desk in fractured patterns. There, I found more than I bargained for. Stacks of documents, contracts with no logos, transactions between companies I had never heard of, all moving massive amounts of money. Some names were familiar, celebration, almost coded. And then I found it, a small, locked drawer in the desk, one he had never shown me. Inside were photos, him shaking hands with men whose smiles didn't reach their eyes, briefcases exchanged in parking lots, meetings in warehouses with black Dodge Chargers and Cadillacs in the background. The more I looked, the colder I felt. This was no ordinary wealth. This was something different, dangerous. I wanted to confront him, but I stopped myself. I had seen enough to know that anger or accusation wouldn't work. He was careful, precise, always 3 steps ahead. Instead, I made a choice. I would watch, quietly, and collect my own pieces of the puzzle. The next few days were a test of my patience. Every luxury outing, every drive in the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 or Corvette, every rooftop dinner with champagne that could fund a small town became a stage. I watched the way people deferred to him, the way his presence seemed to bend reality around him. But behind the charm, the smiles, the effortless confidence, there was tension, a network of control I couldn't yet fully map. Then came the first real scare. I noticed a black SUV following him one night as he drove the Dodge Challenger Hellcat down the quiet streets. Its headlights were always just behind him, never too close, never too far. When he returned home, he didn't mention it, but I could see the subtle change in his expression, the tightening around his eyes, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. He was always in control, but someone or something was testing him. Luxury became a language of deception. Every car, every penthouse window, every glass of champagne on the balcony wasn't just a symbol of wealth, they were camouflage. While I had once been dazzled, now I could see the pattern, the speed, the shine, the glamour. They hid secrets. One night, alone in the penthouse, I opened the laptop he had left unlocked. It was risky, I knew, but I couldn't resist. Emails poured in and out, cryptic subject lines, confirmed tonight, safe routes secured, all transfers cleared. Nothing overtly illegal. Nothing that could be pinned down easily, but the repetition, the urgency, the secrecy. It painted a picture I couldn't ignore by this point. I was terrified and exhilarated at the same time. I had married into luxury, into a world of American muscle cars and private jets, exclusive penthouses and rooftop champagne, but that world came with strings attached, strings I was only starting to see. And then the final clue for this week fell into my lap. A name kept appearing in his emails, a name I didn't recognize, Morrison & Co. At first, I thought it was just another investor, another company in his web. But one afternoon, curiosity pushed me further. I Googled it. There was almost nothing. Online, no website, no headquarters, just a registration in a tiny, obscure state. And every connection I could trace led back to him. I felt my stomach twist. He was careful, meticulous, and intelligent. But someone or something was keeping him on edge too. And I had just started peeling back the first layer of a life so lavish, so untouchable, yet so dangerously secretive. By the end of part 3, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just witnessing his world anymore. I was inside it. And if I wasn't careful, I could get trapped. The luxury, the cars, the champagne, everything that had drawn me in was also the mask that hid, a truth that could destroy everything I thought I knew. By the 4th week, the life I thought I had married into began to feel like a gilded cage. Every morning, I woke to the gleam of the Cadillac Escalade parked below, the polished Corvette Z06 and Dodge Challenger Hellcat reflecting sunlight off the driveway. But the sparkle that had once thrilled me now felt like a warning, a reminder that beauty could hide something dangerous. It started subtly, small inconsistencies in his stories, unexplained absences, and a sudden obsession with privacy. One evening, I followed him to a part of the city I didn't know. He drove the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, engine growling through quiet streets, until he stopped outside a nondescript warehouse, the kind of place you'd pass 100 times without a second glance. He didn't notice me at first. I watched as men in dark suits entered with briefcases, exchanging nods that were sharper than pleasantries. I couldn't hear their words, but the tension radiated off them like heat from asphalt. My heart raced. This wasn't business as I knew it. This was something else, something dangerous. When he returned home hours later in the Tesla Plaid, he was calm, casual, but there was a subtle tension in his eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. I tried to act normal, pouring champagne as if nothing had happened, but every glance I caught told me he knew I was paying attention. Luxury, I realized, was a shield. Every gleaming car, every rooftop dinner, every silk sheet was part of a performance. People weren't just impressed, they were distracted. And I had been distracted too, until now. That night, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers. I started piecing together what I had seen, the offshore accounts, the secret phone calls, the cryptic emails, the warehouse meetings. I didn't understand the details, but I could see the pattern: secrecy, power, and control. Then came the first real scare. A black SUV I hadn't seen before was parked across the street from our penthouse. At first I thought it was coincidence, but night after night, it appeared, always waiting, always watching. My husband didn't mention it, but I could see the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his hand tightened around the champagne flute. I began noticing other things too. Luxury trips booked at the last minute, drivers who never spoke but seemed to understand more than they should, and men in suits who appeared briefly in our building, always nodding to him, never acknowledging me. The glitter of his world was now flashing warnings in every reflection, every mirrored surface, every car window. The first confrontation happened subtly. One evening, while he was distracted by a call, I asked about the warehouse I had seen him visit. He froze. For a split second I saw the mask slip, a flash of something I couldn't name: anger, calculated control. Then he smiled, smooth, practiced. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he said. "Trust me, love. Some things are better left unknown." But I couldn't leave it unknown. That night I took my laptop and began mapping everything: emails, phone calls, trips, the flow of cars and men he associated with. The more I dug, the more I realized just how carefully orchestrated his life was. Every luxury, every flash of wealth, every roar of a Corvette or Challenger, all of it was part of the illusion. And then, the first direct threat appeared. A note slipped under my bedroom door. "Curiosity is dangerous. Stop looking." No signature, no hint, just those words. My heart raced, but instead of fear, a strange resolve settled over me. I had stepped into this world, and now I had to understand it, no matter the cost. By the end of the 4th week, I realized something terrifying. I was living in a world of luxury, speed, and glittering American muscle cars, but each shine masked a shadow I didn't yet fully see. And the deeper I dug, the more I understood that the man I had married wasn't just wealthy, was untouchable, controlled, and possibly dangerous. I lay in the penthouse that night, listening to the distant hum of the city, the soft whisper of the wind against the glass. The Cadillac, the Tesla, the Corvette gleamed under the streetlights, and I realized, with a chill that crawled down my spine, the luxury wasn't the dream I thought it was. It was the mask of a secret world I had just begun to uncover, and there was no turning back now. By the 5th week, I could no longer pretend that my life was just a story of love and luxury. Every sleek line of a Corvette C06, every growl of the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, every smooth ride in the Tesla Plaid became a reminder that I was living a life that shimmered on the surface but hid shadows underneath. The thrill of wealth had turned into a pulse-quickening tension. I couldn't shake it. Started with surveillance. I began following him discreetly, keeping a safe distance. As he moved through the city, he drove the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 one afternoon, weaving through quiet streets, meeting men I couldn't identify. The conversations were brief, hushed, a subtle exchange of nods and gestures that carried meaning I couldn't grasp. But the fact that I was even able to tail him made my heart pound. That night, I returned to the penthouse, the city lights reflecting off the Cadillac Escalade in the driveway. I tried to process what I had seen. The luxury I had once marveled at now felt like a veil, hiding a world I wasn't yet ready to confront. And yet, every fiber of me was drawn deeper into it. The next clue came unexpectedly. While organizing his office, I found a folder labeled assets. Inside were more offshore accounts, but also receipts for luxury items I hadn't seen. Limited edition Corvettes, classic Mustangs, private jets, and even a yacht moored in a hidden marina. But the transactions were unusual: payments made to anonymous accounts, transfers routed through layers of companies with no apparent purpose other than secrecy. I realized then that his wealth wasn't just massive, it was carefully constructed to conceal its origins, and that terrified me more than anything else. The luxury cars, the penthouse, the rooftop dinners with champagne flowing like rivers, they weren't just indulgence, they were distractions, and possibly shields. Determined to know more, I began digging online. What I found was scarce press articles portrayed him as a young tech entrepreneur, a rising star, but everything seemed sanitized, curated, no real details, no interviews, no real evidence of where the money came from. And that only made my gut tighten. I started noticing patterns, meetings that appeared out of nowhere, briefcases exchanged in parking garages, and the constant presence of luxury cars, American muscle and electric marbles alike, as if the vehicles themselves were signals in some hidden network. One night, a black SUV followed him as he drove the Dodge Challenger, its engine silent, unassuming. He noticed it. Yes, but did he expect me? The realization sent a chill down my spine. The tension in our home escalated. One morning, I confronted him gently about the unusual trips in the folders I had found. His smile was calm, too calm, like a mask glued perfectly to his face. "Some things are better left undiscovered," he said. But in that moment, I saw a flicker, a flash of steel behind his eyes that didn't belong to the man I thought I knew. I knew then that I had crossed a line. Curiosity had become dangerous, but I couldn't stop. I had glimpsed too much. The luxury, the cars, the champagne, it all belonged to a world where the rules were invisible, and breaking them could have consequences I couldn't yet imagine. That night, I made a decision. I would continue to follow him, track his movements, and try to understand the network he had built. The luxury cars weren't just tools of wealth, they were part of the puzzle. Each engine roar, each sleek line, each gleaming chrome detail might be a signal, a code, or a warning. By the 6th week of our marriage, the glitter of the penthouse, the roar of the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, and the sleek gleam of the Corvette Z06 no longer thrilled me. They felt like warnings I couldn't afford to ignore. The luxury had become a map, a network of signals I was only beginning to read, and each one led me closer to truths I wasn't sure I wanted to face. It started with the warehouse. I had followed him too in part 4. The curiosity that had once been a whisper had grown into a relentless drumbeat in my mind. I decided to return discreetly, of course. This time, I parked a block away in the Cadillac Escalade, heart pounding, and watched as he arrived in the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. Men in suits moved around him like shadows, exchanging briefcases that glinted under the warehouse lights. I waited until nightfall, slipping closer through the shadows. That's when I saw it. Crates being unloaded from a black SUV into the warehouse. The labels were obscured, but I glimpsed a flash of documents inside, something that looked illegal, something dangerous. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't look away. When I returned home, the penthouse felt different. The city skyline, once glittering with possibilities, now looked like a cage. The Tesla Plaid was parked silently in the driveway, its reflective windows concealing secrets I was desperate to uncover. I opened the laptop he had left unlocked, cross-referencing the crates, shipments, and offshore accounts. Slowly, patterns emerged. Money was moving in ways I didn't understand. But the rhythm was clear. Funds routed through shell companies, shipments that vanished without records, and frequent contacts with people whose names I had never seen before. Every luxurious purchased a classic Mustang, the Ford G2. Even the small indulgences like rare wines and custom watches was a breadcrumb, a distraction, a signal. Then came the first undeniable proof. Buried in the emails was a single, unencrypted message with attached photos. My heart raced as I opened them. They showed him, my husband, standing beside men in dark suits, overseeing shipments in warehouses, briefcases exchanging hands, black Dodge Chargers parked outside like silent sentinels. This wasn't just business. It wasn't even just secrecy. It was something illegal, dangerous. I felt my hand shake. I had known something was off, but seeing proof made the world tilt. Luxury cars, champagne, they had been the mask all along. The roar of engines, the gleam of polished steel, the glittering city skyline, they were camouflage for something I wasn't yet prepared to confront. That night, I confronted him not aggressively, but with a quiet determination that startled even me. "I know there's more to your world than you've shown me," I said, watching his face. He smiled, that calm, practiced smile, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Some things," he replied slowly, "are better left undiscovered." But I couldn't leave it undiscovered. I was in too deep. The evidence, the photos, the shipments, they were real, tangible. Luxury had led me here, and now it was my only path forward. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything: the penthouse, the cars, the trips, the emails, the warehouses. I mapped it all. Each luxury item, from the Cadillac Escalade to the Ford GT, every rooftop dinner and champagne toast, was part of a larger web I had to understand. The wealth that had once dazzled me was now a labyrinth of secrecy, danger, and power. By the 7th week, my life had become a delicate balancing act between awe and fear. Every polished surface, the leather seats of the Cadillac Escalade, the glossy curves of the Corvette Z06, the gleaming chrome of the Dodge Challenger held a reminder of the world I had stepped into, and the invisible danger lurking behind it. I had concrete evidence now: the warehouse photos, the secret shipments, the offshore accounts. But knowing and proving were two different things. Every move I made, I realized, could be watched, anticipated. He was meticulous. Every luxury purchase, every flashy car, every penthouse dinner wasn't just indulgence, it was camouflage, a way to keep the world dazzled while hiding the machinery of something far darker. I began tracing his contacts, the emails, the cryptic messages, the men in dark suits. They all connected like points in a web. Each node was a secret, each line a possible risk. I started noting license plates, car models, meeting locations. The Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 Hydra wasn't just fast, it was a mobile signal, a moving fortress. And everywhere I went, every time I followed him in the Tesla Plaid, I felt that same pulse of danger humming beneath the surface. One evening, I followed him to a private airstrip, hidden on the outskirts of the city. He drove the Ford GT engine roaring, the streetlights reflecting off its black paint. A private jet waited, sleek, modern, and unmarked. Men in tailored suits moved around it with quiet precision, unloading crates and briefcases. I kept my distance, heart hammering. The photos I had taken, the notes I had made, they were proof. Yes, but they'd barely scratched the surface of the labyrinth. He navigated daily. Back at the penthouse. The luxury felt suffocating. The skyline glimmered, the champagne was chilled, the silk sheets beckoned, but it all felt like a stage set for something I wasn't allowed to see. And then came the first real threat. A man at the penthouse door, claiming to be a delivery. When I opened it, he handed me a single envelope. No markings, no return address, just my name, written in sharp, deliberate letters. Inside was a single message. Stop digging. You're in over your head. I felt the blood drain from my face. My first instinct was fear, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He didn't know how much I had already seen, how much I had already traced. I realized then I was entangled in something much larger than I had imagined. The luxury cars, the penthouse, the private jets, they weren't just indulgence. They were shields. And now I was part of the battlefield. I decided I needed allies, though I had no one to trust. My friends had no idea what world I had stepped into. Even family wouldn't understand. So I turned inward, documenting every detail. Car models, engine types, warehouse locations, dates, times, every luxury item he owned. The 1969 Mustang, Buff 429, the Dodge Challenger, the Cadillac Escalades became a clue, part of a network that I had to map to understand his empire. And then, late one night, I found another layer, a hidden email thread between him and someone named Morrison & Co., previously obscure, now revealing a pattern. Shipments timed with offshore transfers, luxury cars moved internationally, crates disappearing without records. I felt a chill so cold it made me shiver. This wasn't just wealth, it was a system built for secrecy, power, and possibly crime. By the end of Part 7, I realized I had reached a dangerous turning point. The luxury that had once dazzled me, the roar of engines, the gleam of chrome, the sparkle of the skyline, had become my lens into a hidden world, and that world was dangerous. Every car, every penthouse, every lavish dinner was part of the performance. And if I wasn't careful, curiosity wouldn't just cost me comfort, it could cost me everything. I had seen the shadows behind the glamour, and now I was certain of one thing: the web was tightening, and the stakes were far higher than I had ever imagined. By the 8th week, I had learned a terrifying truth. Luxury was not just a lifestyle, it was a disguise. The Cadillac Escalade gleaming below our penthouse, the Corvette Z06 parked with meticulous precision, even the Dodge Challenger Hellcat in the corner of the garage. They were signals, shields, and distractions all at once. And the man I had married, the millionaire I thought I knew, was living in the heart of a dangerous network. I could barely comprehend it all came to a head. One night, I had followed him to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the Ford GT growling behind me in the shadows. Men in dark suits moved around him like shadows themselves, handling crates and briefcases with precision. For the first time, I saw him truly in his element, but this element was a world of risk and secrecy. And then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The crates contained high-value electronics, rare vehicles, and documents marked confidential. I couldn't see everything, but the implication was clear. This was more than just money. This was organized, dangerous, and possibly illegal. I tried to retreat unnoticed, but one of the men glanced in my direction. My heart raced as I ducked behind a 1969 Mustang Boss 429, its chrome reflecting the dim warehouse lights. He didn't follow, but the warning was unmistakable. I had crossed a line. Back at the penthouse, tension crackled in the air. I confronted him not with accusation, but with the truth I had documented. "I've seen enough," I said quietly, my hand shaking despite the calm I tried to project. His reaction was chilling. For a split second, the charming millionaire vanished, replaced by a man who exuded control, power, and danger. "Curiosity can be deadly," he said, voice low and controlled. "Do you understand that?" I nodded. But inside, fear and resolve battled fiercely. I realized I was now playing a game I hadn't asked to join. Every Tesla plaid ride, every private jet trip, every luxurious dinner was no longer just indulgency, it was a lesson in power. And I was learning too late that I had to move carefully. Over the next few days, I noticed shifts in his behavior. Meetings became more secretive, phone calls sharper. The Chevrolet Camaro Z01 and Corvette Z06 always out, ready for instant travel. Even our home felt different. Drivers waited outside in black SUVs, unknown faces appeared briefly, and every luxury item became a tool, a distraction, or a warning. Then came the undeniable proof. I found emails linking him to an international network, showing transactions of rare cars, electronics, and shipments moving under coded names. The numbers were staggering, and the system was so intricate it could only be managed by someone who understood risk, secrecy, and control. Luxury had been the mask, and now I could see the machinery beneath. That night, another envelope appeared at the penthouse door. Inside, a single card. "You're watching too closely. Stop now." The handwriting was sharp, deliberate. Fear clawed at me, but determination burned brighter. I realized that if I turned back now, I would never understand the full scope. And if I continued, I was placing myself in danger unlike anything I had ever imagined. I spent hours documenting everything: the Cadillac Escalade, the Dodge Challenger, the Ford GT, the rooftop dinners, the shipments, each luxury item, each gleaming car, each opulent detail became a piece of the puzzle. And slowly, I began connecting the dots. Offshore accounts, coded shipments, secret warehouses, men in suits, and a network that spanned cities, countries, and continents.
By the 9th week, I was no longer just a spectator in his world. The penthouse, once a dream of silk sheets, champagne, and skyline views, now felt like a gilded cage. Every car in the garage, the Cadillac Escalade, the Corvette Z06, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, the Ford GT, even the classic 1969 Mustang Boss 429 was a signal, a tool, a part of a network I was only beginning to map. And the man I had married, he wasn't just a millionaire. He was the epicenter of a hidden empire. It started with the documents I had been collecting for weeks: offshore accounts, shell companies, coded emails, and warehouses in multiple cities. It all formed a vast, interconnected network. I realized his wealth wasn't just from legitimate business ventures. Luxury was a cover. Every sleek car, every opulent penthouse dinner, every glittering champagne toast had been a distraction from the machinery that fueled his fortune. Determined to understand the full scale, I started tracing the shipments I had glimpsed at the warehouses. High-value electronics, rare vehicles, and unmarked crates moved across state lines, often under false registrations. Men in black SUVs and Chevy Camaros ZL1 transported them with precision. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that luxury wasn't just wealth, it was part of the operation, a symbol and a shield all at once. One night, I followed him to a private airstrip, hidden from the city, the Ford GT roaring behind me. He climbed aboard a sleek private jet, unmarked, guarded by men in suits who didn't acknowledge me. Crates were loaded into the cargo hold, their contents hidden behind layers of secrecy. I couldn't see everything, but I knew enough. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, control, and risk on a scale I hadn't imagined. Back at the penthouse, tension was suffocating. The black Cadillac Escalade waited silently outside. The Dodge Challenger Hellcat gleamed in the garage, and the Corvette Z06 reflected the city lights like a predator's eyes. I began mapping his contacts: names, emails, phone numbers, warehouses, vehicles, shipping routes. Each luxury item became a clue, each gleaming car a signal. Slowly, the empire emerged in my mind. And then came the first direct confrontation with danger. A call in the middle of the night, a voice I didn't recognize. Stop looking or you'll regret it. My heart raced, but instead of fear, determination set in. I realized I was too deep to turn back. The luxury, the cars, the champagne, they had drawn me into a hidden world. Now it was my job to navigate it carefully. The next day, I discovered more. An offshore transfer lined up with a shipment, coded in a way that even I could decipher. Rare vehicles moving internationally, documents traveling through multiple shell companies, and men in dark suits overseeing every step. The scale was staggering. The empire wasn't just a collection of wealth, it was a carefully orchestrated operation that spanned countries and industries. Luxury had been the lure, but now it was the lens. Each vehicle, the Cadillac Escalade, the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, the Tesla Plaid, and the Ford GT were part of a system. Each penthouse dinner, each rooftop champagne toast, each sleek, polished car in the driveway, they were all distractions, part of a performance to keep the outside world dazzled, while the real work happened behind the scenes. By the 10th week, I knew I was no longer just a wife in a world of silk sheets, rooftop champagne, and American muscle cars. I was a witness, a participant, and if I wasn't careful, a target. Every luxury in my life, the Cadillac Escalade gleaming in the driveway, the Corvette Z06, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, the Tesla Plaid, even the 1969 Mustang Boss 429 had been part of a performance masking the machinery of a fortune built on secrecy, risk, and danger. It all came to a head one stormy night. I followed him to a private port where crates and rare vehicles were being loaded onto an unmarked cargo ship. The Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 led the convoy, black SUVs flanking every move. Men in dark suits coordinated the operation with precision. I hid behind stacked containers, my heart pounding, realizing that the world I had marveled at, the luxury, the wealth, the cars, was just the surface. Then I saw it clearly. Documents in plain view, shipments moving under aliases, offshore accounts aligned with every transfer. Luxury cars weren't just indulgences, they were tools, signals, even decoys. The empire he had built wasn't just about money, it was a network of control, risk, and shadows, and I had been living inside it, thinking it was all glamour. I snapped photos with my phone, careful to remain hidden. My hands shook, adrenaline coursing through me. I had the proof now, the undeniable evidence of a fortune built on secrecy and illegal operations. But I knew I had to be careful. Any misstep could put me in real danger. When I returned to the penthouse, he was waiting, calm, composed, but with a sharpness in his eyes that made me pause. The Cadillac Escalade, the Corvette, the Dodge Challenger all gleamed under the city lights, a silent reminder of the power he wielded. "You've been busy," he said, voice smooth but laced with warning. I held my ground. "I know the truth," I said. "I know what your fortune is really built on." For the first time, he didn't smile. He looked at me, really looked at me, measuring my courage, my fear, my resolve. "Do you?" he asked, almost softly. Then he added, "Some secrets are worth dying for." I realized then that luxury had always been a mask. The champagne, the silk sheets, the penthouse, the cars, they dazzled the world while hiding the machinery beneath, and I had been pulled into a game of power, wealth, and control I barely understood. But I had seen too much. I had documented everything: the Ford GT, the Tesla Plaid, the 1969 Mustang, the warehouses, the shipments, the offshore accounts. I had traced the empire, and I understood its rhythm, and I knew one thing: I could expose it, survive it, and finally understand the man I had married. He stepped closer, the roar of a Dodge Challenger Hellcat echoing in the distance, as one of his cars left for an unknown location. "You're clever," he said. "Most people wouldn't see past the luxury, but you've been paying attention." I nodded. "I had to," I said, "because now I know, and nothing will blind me again." The storm outside mirrored my emotions: tension, fear, awe. Luxury had drawn me in, but truth had become the only path forward. The Cadillac, the Corvette, the Tesla, the Mustang, all symbols of power, all part of the empire, now reflected something new. Not just wealth, but risk, danger, and a choice I had to make. By the end of part 10, I realized the ultimate truth. I had married a millionaire, but his fortune was more than money. It was secrecy, danger, and power. Luxury had been the lure, but curiosity had become my weapon. I had uncovered the empire behind the glamour, faced the first real threat, and survived. And in that survival, I understood the reality. Nothing in his world was what it seemed, and the glittering cars, the champagne, the penthouse, they were only the beginning of the story. As I looked out over the city from our penthouse, the lights reflecting off the polished American muscle cars, I felt a mix of fear, awe, and determination. Luxury had drawn me into his world, but knowledge would keep me alive. And one thing was certain: the next step I took would define everything: my life, my freedom, and the true cost of marrying a man whose fortune was built on secrets.